Hello, how are you everyone? I'm just going to wait here for a few minutes and make sure that we have everyone who's coming on. We have a great class tonight. I'm glad that you could join us. We're here tonight at the Kreitz Castle. That's what we endearingly call our home. We have really great Wi-Fi here. We found it was better than at the meeting space we were using, so we decided to go on. I see that one has joined me today. If you could just sign in with your name and your course in the comment section below the video, that would be really great. We want to count your attendance. Still, again, we're just waiting on a few more folks just to give them an opportunity to get that notification on their phone and log in. Okay, and once again, for those who have just joined us, if you could comment in the comment section, let me know you're here and let me know the degree program that you were in. I would greatly appreciate that so we could count you for attendance. We're going to get started really quick because we have a pretty full class with COU 612, Counseling Theories and Strategies. And I do want to just say to you, in case you haven't checked your email yet, if you are enrolled as an NCU student and you are either in the Bachelor of Christian Counseling class or the Master of Christian Counseling class, I did email these notes to you, so you may want to check your email for your notes. It's quite an extensive class, so if you just wanted to pop over to your email account and look at your notes, that would be a great thing. If not, you can always fill it in later. As well, if you are a master in any other subject other than Christian counseling, it's good to see you here tonight. Hi, Carolyn, and hello, Ricardo. How are you guys doing? I'm so glad that you've joined us. If you guys are in a Christian counseling course, then I will need for you to watch. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Hang on, Ricardo, for just one moment. Okay, just making sure. I thought I had you in the wrong program, but I do have you in the right program. Okay, so let's begin. All right. Psychotherapy is what we're talking about tonight, and the theories, there are 5 different theories. They provide a framework for therapists and counselors to interpret a client's behavior, thoughts, and feelings and help them navigate a client's journey from diagnosis to post-treatment. So it's kind of how every counselor has their own theory or their own strategy that they use in order to provide counseling services to their clients. Theoretical approaches are an understandably integral part of the therapeutic process. So the following detailed descriptions will give you a deeper understanding of 5 counseling methods to help you describe which theory you as a counselor would like to offer. Now, there are more than 5 different theories, but we're just going to go over the major 5 because right now we only have time to kind of introduce to you these 5 different theories and kind of get you acquainted with some of the grammar that we use with it. Okay, let's take a look at number 1. Number 1 is psychoanalysis or psychodynamic theory. Psychoanalysis, also known as historical perspective, has its roots with Sigmund Freud. Many of us are well aware of Sigmund Freud and his role that he has played in our current counseling and psychology practices today. But Sigmund Freud believed that there were unconscious forces that drive behavior. The techniques he developed, such as free association, free talking, which is free talking to the therapist about whatever comes up without censoring, dream analysis, which is examining dreams for important information about the unconscious mind, and transference, which means that you're redirecting the feelings about certain people in one's life onto the therapist, are still used by psychoanalysts today. In general, psychotherapists and counselors who use this approach direct much of their focus and energy on analyzing past relationships and especially traumatic childhood experiences in relation to an individual's current life. It's where we get a lot of the jokes in the sitcoms where they say, you know, lay down on the couch, did you hate your mother, did you hate your father? This was that theory that we're talking about. The belief is that by revealing and bringing these issues to surface, treatment and healing can occur. The theory is highly researched, and as the field of neuroscience advances, counselors are finding how psychodynamic theory can positively affect a client's brain. Psychodynamic theory can be more time-intensive in comparison to some short-term theories because it involves changing deeply ingrained behavior and requires significant work on understanding oneself. So that's why counselors who use this type of theory are somewhat expensive because it does take so much time. And that's why sometimes clients will say, you know, I've been in counseling for years and years, for 8 years, for 10 years. And it's because they have to delve into the past. And sometimes it can be challenging to bring up some of the memories. And so it takes time to do all of that. So the terms that we kind of need to know. Oh, hello, Dr. Ford. We're so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you've joined us. So the terms that we need to know following our notes that you should have received in an email, and if you didn't, just simply let me know in the comments below or with a separate email, and I will send them to you. Number one, Freud believed that most mental processes are unconscious. He proposed that people had 3 levels of awareness, okay? Number one, the conscious contains all the information that a person is paying attention to at any given time. So, you know, an example would be, you know, the words that I'm reading now, this video that you're paying attention to, you're consciously aware of what you're paying attention to right now, what's right in front of you. Hi, Leisha. Number 2, the pre-conscious. It contains all of the information outside of a person's attention, but it's readily available if needed. For example, Linda's a telephone number or the make of I'm sorry, your past telephone number, the make of your car, you know, maybe your address. These are things that you know, and they're in your pre-conscious. And number 3, the unconscious contains thoughts, feelings, desires, and memories of which people have no awareness, but that influence everyday aspect of their day-to-day lives. Like, for example, you may be afraid of spiders because you encountered a frightening spider when you were 3 years old, or maybe you're afraid of snakes because someone scared you with a rubber one when you were 2. So these are things that you act out of and that you have the memory for, but that you can't really pull up. You have to have a trigger that'll help you to remember that. So those are the 3 levels of awareness that Freud defined. Okay, and moving on in our notes, number 4 is called the Freudian slip. a mistaken conversation that is subconsciously what a person really means. Kathy calls up her mother on Mother's Day and says, "You're the beast, Mom," when she consciously intended to say, "You're the best, Mom." According to psychoanalytic theory, the slip of the tongue is known as the Freudian slip, and it reveals her unconscious anger toward her mother. Again, I'm just giving you terms that you'll need to be familiar with in your studies on these different counseling theories. In the next point, we're going to talk about the id, the ego, and the superego. Freud proposed that personalities, remember he proposed that we have 3 levels of consciousness. Now he proposed that we have 3 components to our personality, and it's called the id, the ego, and the superego. So let's talk about the id first. Okay, the id is a reservoir of instinctual energy that contains biological urges such as impulses towards survival, sex, and aggression. Id is spelled I-D for those of you who are filling in your notes. The id is unconscious, and it operates according to the pleasure principle, the drive to achieve pleasure and avoid pain. Some people call it the survival instinct. The id is characterized by the primary process thinking, which is illogical, irrational, and motivated by a desire for the immediate gratification of impulses. It's strictly instinctual. Okay? Everyone understand? Well, hello, Miss Akriba, and hello, Yolanda. I'm very glad. Miss Bailey, you didn't get the notes because you're in a Christian leadership class, but I can certainly email you the notes after our class tonight. All right, number 6. Let's talk about number 6, the ego, ego. The ego is the component that manages the conflict between the id and the constraints of the real world. Some parts of the ego are unconscious, while others are preconscious or conscious. The ego operates according to the reality principle, the awareness that gratification of impulses has to be delayed in order to accommodate the demands of the real world. The ego is characterized by secondary process thinking, so not quite instinctual, which is logical and rational. The ego's role is to prevent the id from gratifying its impulses in socially inappropriate ways. You know, if you're really starving and you're really hungry, and most of us arrive to a restaurant at that time, you don't get your food and then start like putting your face in your plate. Your ego prevents that. You're starving, you're hungry, but you know you still put your napkin on your lap, you pray before eating, you use your fork and your knife, and you eat appropriately. Number 7 is the superego. Right now we're talking about the 3 components, according to Freud, of our personality, and the 3rd one is superego. The moral component of personality. It contains all the moral standards learned from parents and society. The superego forces the ego to conform not only to reality, but also its ideals of morality. Hence, the superego causes the people to feel guilty when they go against society's rules. Like the ego, though, the superego operates at all 3 levels of awareness. So we know how we're feeling instinctually, and we know what we want to do, but the superego, it acts as it acts according to how we've been taught morally and our code of ethics and such. Continuing on with terms needed for this, for the counseling theories. Number 8, we're going to talk about conflict. Freud believed that the id, the ego, and the superego are in constant conflict because you know what you want to do, but you know what you have to do according to societal rules. So he believed that we were always in conflict with ourselves. Number 9, anxiety. Anxiety. Internal conflicts can make a person feel anxious. In Freud's view, anxiety arises when the ego cannot adequately balance the demands of the id and the superego. It was caught in the middle. The id demands gratifications of its impulses, and the superego demands maintenance of its moral standards. Number 10, defense mechanisms. We've all heard that term. We've all heard that, and we all know that we have our own defense mechanisms. But a defense mechanism manages these internal conflicts with ourselves. People use defense mechanisms, and they are behaviors that protect people from anxiety. There are many types of different defense mechanisms, and we're going to talk about just a few moving on in the notes. The first one we'll talk about is repression. Keeping unpleasant thoughts, memories, and feelings shut up in the unconscious. For instance, a young man may have witnessed his mother being beaten by a mugger when he was 7 years old, but as an adult, he doesn't remember this incident. And I think that you will come across quite a few people who will block negative things out of their thinking or out of their memory just because it was so traumatizing. And that's called repression. The next one is a reaction formation. Behaving in a way that is opposite to behavior, feelings, or thoughts that are considered unacceptable. For example, Lisa feels attracted to her roommate's boyfriend but does not admit this to herself. Instead, she constantly makes very disparaging comments about the boyfriend and feels disgusted by the way he acts because she acts in opposition of the way she feels because she knows that she can't act on her feelings, and that's called reaction formation. The third type is projection, attributing one's own unacceptable thoughts or feelings to someone else. That's a lot of our arguments, and in marriage counseling we use that. We accuse someone else of having a particular behavior or attitude when it's ourselves that we're seeing it come from, and we just don't realize it because it's not mirrored to us. The next one is called rationalization. Rationalization, using incorrect but self-serving explanations to justify behavior, thoughts, or feelings. For example, if someone runs a red light while driving, she justifies this by telling herself she was already in the intersection when the light changed to red, or she was in a great hurry, or it was an emergency here. She tries to justify it. And that's called rationalization. And the next one is displacement. Transferring feelings about a person or event onto someone or something else. That's displacement. For example, Seth would be angry at his professor for giving him a bad grade. He leaves his class and shouts angrily at a passerby who accidentally bumps into him. Well, first of all, he's angry at the professor when it's his own paper that made the bad grade. And then secondly, instead of talking to the professor about it, he shouts at someone who totally has no conflict with him. He doesn't even know. That's called displacement. Hello, Nadia. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, Yolanda. The next one is denial, refusing to acknowledge something that is totally obvious to others. And we've seen this on a lot of sitcoms. For instance, Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory, everyone sees that he's very OCD, but he doesn't himself see it. So, in fact, he is in denial. He thinks he's perfectly normal. And the next one is regression, reverting to a more immature state of psychological development. That's called regression. For example, when a 6-year-old Jamil gets less attention from his parents because of a new baby brother, he might start to, wet his bed at night, or he might start to be acting out in a way that a baby would. That's regression. And the last one we'll talk about is sublimation, channeling unacceptable thoughts and feelings into socially acceptable behavior. For example, someone might deal with their angry feelings toward their family by writing sci-fi stories about battles between civilizations. And that's, some people might paint, some people might do a lot of different things. That's called sublimation. So there are many counselors who use this theory. As I said, it is time consuming, but it is kind of the old standard way of doing counseling. But there are some criticisms of psychodynamic theory. Number one, Freud's original ideas aren't as popular today as they were when he was making these discoveries, but many psychologists do adhere to neo-Freudian ideas. However, other psychologists criticize the psychodynamic theories for a lot of reasons. For example, they say that psychodynamic theories are not falsifiable, so they're not scientifically correct. And in response to this criticism, proponents of psychodynamic theories point out that empirical evidence doesn't support some psychodynamic concepts. But for example, the research shows that there are unconscious mental processes, that people have mental representations of other people, and that people use unconscious defense mechanisms to protect themselves from unpleasant emotions such as anxiety, and that's very hard to quantify. Other critics argue that psychodynamic theories are made by generalizing from a smaller number of patients to the whole human population. Relying on only case studies can lead to faulty conclusions. And then the last thing is that the last criticism is that psychodynamic theories aren't based on studies that follow people from childhood to adulthood. So instead, psychodynamic theorists listen to descriptions of an adult's past, assuming that they are accurate. So sometimes our memory isn't always the whole memory. And what we'll be remembering would be wrong. For instance, a young child may blame her mother for not going into a shelter when she was escaping a domestic abuse situation. But what the young child wouldn't remember in that memory was, it's not that she was neglecting to go to a shelter, it's that she was she was not going to go to the shelter because she learned that the older son would have to leave that shelter in less than a month, so she opted to do something different. You know, there are always kind of things like that when you're a little child that you don't realize. And so it's important that to know truth when you are experiencing the psychodynamic theory. Let's move on to number 2. We are going to talk about behavioral therapy. Behavioral theory. It's based on the belief that behavior is learned. Classic conditioning is one type of behavioral therapy that stems from the early theorist Ivan Pavlov. Do you remember his dog? Pavlov executed a famous study using his dog when focused on the effects of a learned response. For instance, he would ring a bell and give the dog meat. And so that every time the dog heard the chime of a bell, he would associate that sound with food. So, even if Pavlov didn't have the meat, the dog would still salivate and react as if he were getting food when the bell was rung. That's behavioral theory. There was also another gentleman named B.F. Skinner. He developed another behavioral therapy approach called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning. He believed in the power of rewards to increase the likelihood of a behavior and punishments to decrease the occurrence of a behavior. Behavioral therapists work on changing unwanted and destructive behaviors through behavior modification techniques such as positive or negative reinforcement. We do the same thing with children in school and classroom situations and our children in general. The behavior that we want less of, we punish. The behavior that we want more of, we reward. And that is, that's operant conditioning. Excuse me. Behavior therapy is focused on helping an individual understand how changing their behavior can lead to changes in how they are feeling. So the goal of the behavior is usually focused on increasing the person's engagement in positive or socially reinforcing activities. Behavior therapy is a structured approach that carefully measures what the person is doing and then seeks to increase chances for positive experience. So common techniques of this type of theory include, if you're taking notes, it's the first blank, self-monitoring. This is the first stage of treatment. The person is asked to keep a detailed log of all of their activities during the day. And by examining the list at the next session, the therapist can see exactly what the person is doing. For example, Bill, who is being seen for depression, returns with his self-monitoring list for the past week. And his therapist noticed that it consists of Bill going to work in the morning, returning home at 5:30 p.m. and watching television uninterrupted until 11 p.m. and then going to bed. And that may not be the best route for someone who is experiencing depression to take. The second point on your notes, schedule of weekly activities. This is where the patient and the therapist work together to develop new activities that will provide the patient with chances for positive experience. So talking about Bill again, looking at his self-monitoring sheet, Bill and his therapist determined that watching so much television gives little opportunity for positive social interaction. So they decide that Bill will have dinner out with a friend once a week after work and join a bowling league, if that's your cup of tea. The next one is role playing. The next point is role playing. This is used to help the person develop new skills and anticipate issues that may come up in social interactions. One of the reasons, sorry, my Elvis is barking. For example, one of the reasons that Bill opted to stay home so much before was because he was shy around people and he doesn't know how to start a conversation. So Bill and his therapist worked on this by practicing with each other on how to start a conversation with people he's not so familiar with. Yes, Ms. Bailey is so cute. And the last point under behavior therapy is called behavior modification. In this technique, the patient will receive a reward for engaging in positive behavior. So Bill wants a new fishing rod. He and his therapist set up a behavior modification contract. Well, he will reward himself with a new fishing rod when he reduces his TV watching to 1 hour a day and becomes involved in 3 new activities. So That is behavior theory. One of the things that I personally find difficult with using that theory is that you're strictly working on the behavior. You're not changing anyone's mind or perspective. It's strictly behavior modification. And, you know, sometimes it's really easy for a person, once they're held accountable, to change their behavior. But then once that accountability goes away, which it has to eventually, because you could not possibly hold someone accountable until the day they die, they may not stay on that route. They may say, well, no one will know if I go back to this. And it may be difficult to motivate them to stay in that. But for some, it may be effective. So number 3, we're going to talk about cognitive theory. In the 1960s, psychotherapist Aaron Beck developed the cognitive theory. This is my very favorite way to do counseling. This counseling theory focuses on how people's thinking can change feelings and behaviors. So unlike psychodynamic theory, remember, which is Freud's way of delving into the past and talking about it, therapy based on cognitive theory is brief in nature and oriented toward problem solving, okay? So cognitive therapists focus more on their client's present situation, like what's going on right now that we need to help you with, and distorted thinking than on their past. So it's based on the present situation, their distorted thinking, instead of their past. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you understand, if you're still with me. Cognitive and behavioral therapy are often combined as one form of therapy practiced by counselors and therapists. So if you use cognitive theory, then you use behavioral theory, thank you so much, then you can combine those. And it's more effective than just one or the other. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, has been found in research to help with a number of mental illnesses, including anxiety, personality disorders, eating disorders, and substance abuse disorders. So under your notes, we're on number 3, cognitive therapy. What is cognitive therapy? Everyone with me? Cognitive therapy is a way of talking about the connections between how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. It particularly concentrates on ideas that are unrealistic or off. These often undermine our self-confidence and make us feel depressed or anxious. Looking at these can help us work out different ways of thinking and behaving, and in turn will help us to cope better. The basic premise of cognitive therapy is that we think about the events in our lives and we determine how we feel about them, which in turn influences how we behave. Does that make sense? Like, this happened in my life, I can feel this way or this way, and this is how I'll behave. You see those children who are brother and sister, and or 2 sisters or siblings, and they both come from the same home. And one of them, and they both experience relatively the same things, but one of them grows up and he's, you know, not doing so good. He starts depending on drugs, and he holds resentment against his parents because they were maybe overly strict with him, and he doesn't finish school. But the other one, you know, he experiences the same parents who are just as strict, but they don't have the embitterment, and they grow up and they graduate school and they say, gosh, my parents were hard on me and I'm glad because now look what I have. You've seen those kids, right? Like, And that's what cognitive therapy is about. How does psychological and emotional Cognitive therapy also helps people to look at their rules for living, and that's called a schema. A schema. Schemas are cognitive structures or templates that organize how we think, feel, act, relate, and understand, and they're typically referred to as our personality style. Schemas are outside of conscious awareness, so we don't really know. They determine how we interpret the world and respond to situations. While cognitive structures can be adaptive, allowing us to process information rapidly, the same rapid processing can result in entrenched, maladaptive structures. This is because they are strong beliefs and assumptions about how we should live our lives, in which we develop while we're growing up. But how does psychological and emotional distress occur? Psychological and emotional distress occurs when people perceive the world as threatening or scary. And when this happens, perceptions and interpretations of events become highly selective, egocentric, and rigid, resulting in people making errors in their reasoning. And those are called cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions include all or nothing thinking, like seeing things in total black and white with no gray area. They include a mental filter, dwelling on a single negative detail instead of seeing the whole picture. It's like you're going to Disney World and it rains. And you were like, I had a terrible time at Disney World because it rained, but you got to do a lot of other stuff, but you can only think about the fact that it rained. Okay? Overgeneralization, seeing one negative event. I'm sorry, y'all. Do you hear him? Can you hear him in the background? He's loud for a little thing. He's this big. I don't know. Okay, so I'm sorry. Moving on, jumping to conclusions. Interpreting things negatively when there's no evidence to support it. Sorry about that, Heather. Mind reading, guessing what people are going to say or think without checking it out, without actually talking to the person. Fortune telling. This is a big one. Predicting the future in a negative way without any supporting evidence. Well, I'm not going to do that because if I do that, it's just going to turn out rotten for me. You know, if I go ziplining, the line will probably break. Fortune telling. Discounting the positive. Positive experiences in their mindset are discounted with, they're dismissed. They're just not counted. Magnification, magnifying one's problems and shortcomings or minimizing one's positive qualities. We have a lot of this going on, you know, with different political figures, and oh my gosh, they're just horrible all around. They have no good to them on either side, you know, and we just know that that's not true, that people are more balanced than being all evil or all that or all good. Imperative statements like rigid absolute demands about oneself, others, or the world, taking the form of should, must, ought, have to, or awfulizing. I don't know how to, and leading to, I can't stand it. I just can't stand it. So that's imperative statements always being really, you know, I hate that, you know. So, or how about emotional reasoning? Assuming negative emotional thinking reflects reality. Labeling. We've all been victim of that, or we've all done it at one point in our lives. Middle school is a great breeding ground for labeling, attaching a negative label to an action or person, saying I'm a failure instead of I made a mistake, things like that. Personalization, holding oneself responsible for an event outside of your control. Or tunnel vision, seeing only the negative aspects of a situation. These are all examples of cognitive distortions. Research has shown that specific patterns of thinking are associated with a wide range of emotional and psychological problems. These negative or extreme thought patterns have frequently become so habitual that they are experienced as automatic, and it's difficult to even convince the individual that they have these distortions. So as a counselor, sometimes you have your work cut out for you. And then cognitive restructuring. So cognitive therapy treats emotional problems by changing or restructuring these maladaptive patterns of thoughts. Clients are taught how to uncover and re-examine these negative belief systems and replace them with more adaptive ways of viewing life and events. And through this process, clients can learn self-help techniques that can produce rapid symptom shifts. Remember, because we always sorry here, I lost my words. Right, so we all, when we experience things, we have to determine how we feel about them, and how we feel about what happens to us determines our behavior. So that's why it helps us to, once we change our perspective about things, it helps us to almost effortlessly change our behavior. So it also helps solve current life problems, and it improves self-esteem. This negative pattern of thought, called negative and automatic thoughts, can be seen as abbreviations of deeper cognitive structures called schemas. Remember? Cognitive therapists also teach clients coping skills, which serve two functions. It enables clients to deal with the problems for which they have sought therapy for, and the clients are more able to apply the coping skills to future problems in their lives so that they don't have to stay with a counselor their whole life. How cognitive therapy is different from other therapies, if you're following along in your notes. Cognitive therapy incorporates a variety of features that differ from the traditional psychotherapy and shorten the process of change. 5 of these elements are briefly described by, number 1, the formulation of clients' problems guides the treatment plan. So each treatment plan is going to be somewhat unique. Number 2, the cognitive therapist actively directs clients to the discovery of central thinking problems. So it's important that we're good listeners, because we have to hear their distortions. Okay? Number 3, cognitive therapists and clients actively work together to resolve negative feelings, behaviors, and functioning. You know, sometimes if you're working through Freudian, the psychotherapy, it's a lot of listening and listening and listening and letting the client just talk and talk and talk, but it's not necessarily solving any problems. This way, the client can actively help you to help them. Number 4, cognitive therapy focuses on the resolution of current specific problems, not past problems, not possible future problems, but the current ones, providing a clear structure and focus to the treatment. So it kind of fits with the microwave culture that we have. Let's fix it now. Number 5, the therapist makes joint decisions with the client and regularly asks for feedback to maintain a high degree of collaboration and empathy. In cognitive therapy, the therapist and the client are thought of as partners who are working together on the shared goals of greater health and well-being and improved functioning, viewing automatic thoughts or self-talk as hypotheses that are subject to empirical verification. So they don't always believe what they're saying about themselves once they have the understanding of distortions. So they don't always have to stay in that mindset of this is the way things are, because they may not be that way depending on your perspective. This process has been called collaborative empiricism. Hey, well, listen, folks, I was unable to get through the whole class. We got started a little late due to some technical difficulties, but I'm going to take a break here. I will come back at a later time and teach the rest of this, or if you would just prefer the teacher's notes, just shoot me an email or write it in the comments section. I'm glad we got through cognitive therapy, because I think it's the very best way to go for Christian counselors. I'm going to write in the comments right now my email address and my phone number, and then Dr. Kreitz will be on in just a couple of minutes to teach your doctorate class. But for right now, I'm typing in my email address for any questions, or if you'd like to have the notes from tonight. There it is there. And if you want to call me with any questions, go ahead and call me during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me. And we will see you again real soon. Blessings to you.